Hello everybody and welcome to more Bandit Survivor, but just with a little bit less effort. And today we're going to be talking about Survivor South Africa, or rather the lack of it. Survivor South Africa, seemingly for the indefinite future, has been cancelled, and we're going to be breaking down in this article by News24 why that was. I'm also going to be speculating other reasons that aren't brought up in this article, and plans potentially for Survivor South Africa to bounce back. So this is really interesting because Survivor South Africa has been known to have hiatuses. For example, in the Philippines, season 6, they took a little bit of a break before bringing back their next season. So when I heard that we weren't having a Survivor South Africa season this year, or kind of thought that we weren't having one this year because the times didn't line up, they usually have one in June and they didn't have one in June, then I just established, like they're just taking a gap year. But it seems like no, they've just been dropped, and potentially we might not see any more of the show. I also do have to apologize for my voice. It has gotten better. I can actually speak. Like earlier on in the week, I was just like I pretty much was just mute, so you can hear my voice. It is a bit groggy. If you are aware of the main channel, I've been talking about in community tabs and such that I have been ill. It's a different illness to last week, so I am getting over it slowly but surely. But today is like my free day where I don't have anything on, so I figured I might as well just do all the recording today with more Bandit Survivor shorts. So just get that all out of the way in case from Tuesday and on my voice gets even worse and I might not be able to speak, so at least I have content out for this week. So again, I might sound a little bit groggy, I might be taking more sips of water than per usual, I can only apologise. But this article here, it actually is behind a paywall, so it was rather interesting because there was like a big pop-up box on the screen with South African currency, and apparently your currency is like the letter R with the numbers after it. So for a monthly subscription it was R75, and 75 of any currency is a little bit jarring for me, but then I ran it through a currency converter, and then obviously if you know I'm from Northern Ireland, we use the Great British Pound, we're part of the UK, so when I translated it, it was only about £3, so it wasn't too bad to be able to purchase this article. But this is the first More Bandit Survivor video that I've actually had to spend money on, so this is an article that you won't be able to access naturally. You'll have to pay for it, but you'll be able to see everything here at least. And if you do have the funds, make sure to support the article, because they're pretty much the only people right now that are talking about Survivor South Africa from a media outlet. So this is News24, and has the tribe spoken for the last time? No plans for more Survivor South Africa, says Mnet, who are really the officials behind Survivor South Africa. So Mnet currently has no plans for another season of Survivor South Africa. The 9th season, which Dino Paulo won, was negatively impacted by various factors, and they do go into this article here talking about some of the factors. Again, I feel like there's a very obvious underlying factor that has sort of caused this show to, for the time being, gone into extinction. But we'll be seeing here really how they kind of identify how the show has been going downhill and it's just eventually being cut off. Should the show return, Mnet will relook at the scheduling strategy and make a decision that is best for the audience, says the channel. So Mnet is snuffing out the torch on Survivor South Africa superfans, telling News24 that the pay TV channel currently has no plans for more seasons of Survivor South Africa, which is quite an interesting talking point. They bring it up a few times in this article, so I might as well address it here now, that there was a very big superfan community that was very interested in Survivor South Africa. I feel like if you're more of a casual fan, you may not have heard of Survivor South Africa. You may have only seen like Survivor South Africa Philippines, maybe Champions, but I feel like to see a lot more of the recent seasons and just be a Survivor South Africa superfan in general, you need to be generally a very big super fan in the community. And I know that there's a lot of super fans in South Africa, but it also is a bit of a smaller region, so I feel like casting was a bit harder in that area. We obviously saw that there were individuals that sort of knew each other between going to like similar extracurricular classes together or sort of being childhood friends, so those sort of played into dynamics on the seasons as well. So the ninth and latest season of Survivor SA Return of the Outcasts made its debut exactly a year ago on the 18th of July 2022 on Mnet. So that's why I figured that we might be getting another season. The 10th season of Survivor South Africa, what would have been 2 months ago, because generally they put them out July and June, but again, it's not uncommon for them to postpone these seasons for a year, say. So with the airing of daily episodes in which the returning outcast Dino Paula, they emerged as the winners. So firstly, congratulations to Dino Paulo. I personally sent him a congratulations when he won last season. I believe it was on Facebook. Like, this is interesting about Survivor South Africa, is that the seasons are sort of scattered, so you'll see like Survivor season 1 and 2, and then 3 was a couple of years later, and then season 4 came a little while back. Champions, I think, was in 2013, and then the 2016 version, Philippines, was obviously in 2016, so there's a bit of a gaps between each of the seasons. But I really enjoyed Return of the Outcast personally. I know that my opinion, as we'll see with this article, doesn't entirely translate to the other more general fans, but I thought it was a very fun, specific viewing experience of the show. There was fun dynamics, the gameplay was super hardcore. It was up there with like Cambodia in terms of its strategic gameplay. There was a lot of fun characters that returned, a lot of fan favourites, and I feel like putting 10 pre-jurors against 10 people that made the merge but didn't make it to the final tribal council is a very good idea that I feel like even Survivor US and potentially Survivor Australia should look into, because it's just a good theme in getting individuals back that were all pre-merge and getting individuals that are a bit more under the radar in the merge and didn't manage to make it to the final tribal, make another run in the game because they didn't make it to the end. It is sort of like essentially your D-League of Survivor, where for this Survivor South Africa season they were obviously holding back on like your Rob Bentleys, your Nicoles, maybe even some individuals like a Werner, a Tom, a Jean from these seasons that we see them be runners up, Nicole even. So I feel like they were trying to hold them off and try and establish numbers for an all-star season and get people back for that second opportunity to prove why they're all-stars, which I think would have worked out well. I think it is a good strategy. It's something that I feel like Survivor should have done in this modern era. I could see Survivor 44, which obviously we know is going to be all newbies. I feel like this would be the perfect season for them to do. You take 10 pre-merge contestants, you take 10 merge contestants, put them together and see what happens, and then give them some more spotlight in case they were individuals that were screwed over, as happens in modern Survivor, or else they were just taken out a little bit earlier than expected. I've made a video on my channel about Survivor 43, but it's Return of the Outcasts, and I know individuals like Russell Muscle have done merge versus pre-merge as well, so it is a topic in the community that is quite popular, and it's a shame that we're not going to be seeing more Survivor South Africa, although at least they did go out on a high note, in my opinion, with a very good season for individuals like myself that are big fans of Survivor and international Survivor seasons. So this season, as produced by Afrocans following the Bandit format and set in the Eastern Cape with Nico Pano Gio as host, was negatively affected by various factors. So they're going to list some of them here. Survivor's SA last season suffered as linear TV ratings dropped to 43% with its debut, coupled with a disastrous move to the much earlier time slot of 18:00 or 6 o'clock in the evening, as well as the stacking of 4 episodes per week, which made it difficult for DSTV subscribers to keep up, as viewer fatigue and a lack of time to discuss episodes set in. So they kind of just hit you with all this information at once. So as we always do, let's break this down. So firstly, the TV ratings dropped to 43%. So I have seen discussions online, particularly on Reddit, that this might be a bit of an over-exaggeration, where yes, the initial viewing figures were around this 43%, but then they had like catch-ups later on in the day. So that figure might not be entirely accurate. Again, I'm pretty sure that the viewing figures did drop, but maybe not as much as they're trying to suggest. But also you have to remember that South Africa, again, is quite a small country, but it does have a lot of super fans. But also across the waters, there are going to be individuals that are going to tune into Survivor South Africa. So I know they made a deal with, I believe it's Survivor Australia, where they had an agreement where they would both film seasons on the one site so that people that were Australian could see Survivor South Africa content and vice versa. So that was a very successful thing. But to individuals like myself in the UK, to particularly people that were in America, it was very hard to get your hands on Survivor South Africa content. So some individuals may have went around the backdoor route, where they're not necessarily contributing towards Survivor South Africa's figures. And this is always an interesting dynamic in TV media, specifically Survivor, where international countries like South Africa, and as we might see with the UK, they're going to have individuals that are going to be watching the season that aren't directly contributing towards the TV figures or the ratings, but they are going to be stirring up discussion online. They're going to be going into Facebook group chats, into Reddit chats. They're going to be generating discussion and maybe getting some of their friends involved as well, like telling them about a new season of Survivor that's going on. Like if I have a friend that has maybe just been recently getting into Australian Survivor, and the Survivor South Africa Season 10 was on Newbies, I might say, well, if you like this international Australian Survivor season, when maybe check out Survivor SA. It's got a brand new season as well with castaways that you might enjoy. So you're kind of generating discussion that way as well. So it's interesting. This is pretty much just covering the viewing figures, but I know for a fact that there's individuals that won't be contributing specifically towards that still were making an impression on the show. So they had a disastrous move to a much earlier time slot of 6 o'clock, which I'm pretty sure if it follows anything similar to the UK and even American TV, that would have been a very competitive time slot, and where Survivor's a bit more of a niche, especially for a returnee season, it's going to be hard to keep those viewers interested when maybe there's a bit of a bigger TV Goliath that has a show going on at 6 o'clock. And probably one of the biggest issues was the stacking of 4 episodes per week, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but out of all English-speaking Survivor seasons, I feel like that's the most. Like obviously Survivor US, you have it once a week. Survivor Australia, I believe the time that this Survivor South Africa season was airing, we had Blood vs. Water, which was twice a week. Maybe 3 times a week, because I know the Heroes vs Villains was also 3 times a week, but we haven't really seen it before. And I know that there's a lot of skepticism online, because this was essentially a 24 episode format that took place over a series of 6 weeks. So 6 weeks, you had 4 episodes continuously going on with a cast of only 20 people. So you could clearly tell in the episodes that the producers of Survivor South Africa didn't intend to have this many episodes to fill. A lot of the other Survivor South Africa seasons just had your standard one elimination, move on, one elimination, move on, kind of like Survivor US. Although Survivor US has had non-elimination episodes, generally, like the vast majority of eliminations were traditional vote-offs every single episode. Survivor South Africa followed a similar format for its past 8 seasons, but for this now, it wasn't the case. They had to introduce a lot of non-elimination episodes. Again, there were 18 natural eliminations. That caused there to be 6 non-elimination episodes, and the issue was that they kind of stacked it in a way where a lot of the earlier season didn't have as many of the non-elimination episodes. Like I think the first week had 1 non-elimination episode, the second week had 1 non-elimination episode, so that meant that week 3 and 4, when you're coming into the end game, you were having 2 non-elimination episodes, and that caused, as the article states, viewer fatigue. It did start to drag a little bit, because when you're in the end game in these seasons, particularly in Final 2 formats, then things are a little bit more solidified. The dynamics are a bit less interesting, because you kind of know who's going home, and only clutch immunity saves can kind of save you. And that's what happened in Survivor South Africa, was there was a very established hierarchy, and as a result, there was a bit of viewer fatigue, where they were going to have to go through these rounds that weren't particularly interesting, and to see an elimination, you might have had to watch 2 episodes back to back each day just to see someone that you knew that was getting eliminated get eliminated. And they also, bit of a tangent, but they kind of edited it in a way where there wasn't too many blind sides from the editing side of things, where they very clearly let you know why someone is getting the boot. They did try to switch it up, where the penultimate episode that someone's in, they, for example, highlight them positively, and then they try to establish someone else as the boot on the tribe, only to then flip it in the boot episode. But again, it wasn't really like putting itself into this sort of blindside heavy meta that Survivor fans really enjoy. So that's also a bit of an issue. But as again it says, there was a lack of time to discuss episodes. Now, I didn't do episodic discussions on my channel, and I know that for individuals like the Nullified Take, who we'll also be talking about later on in this video, when they were doing it, they weren't just breaking down one episode, they broke down the whole week. So they would have an entire live stream just to break down the whole week of eliminations, and that would be it, because there was just such little time for discussions. Again, it's 4 episodes a week, one after another, after another, after another. And I remember around this time, I was trying to remember where I was last year. I was pretty much finishing up with the final year of a 2-year course, and you know, I was kind of busy at the time anyway, but I remember that like just there were so many episodes that were getting out, and I just didn't have time to watch them. So there would be like times on like a Saturday where I would be watching 2, 3, maybe even 4 episodes all back to back to back, just to try and catch up with what's going on. And they're large episodes as well. I think they were like an hour and a half. So when you take that into consideration, you are spending a lot of time watching Survivor South Africa. And it was, even the Edgic community, I think, just did it every week because it was so hard to keep up episodically. I know things like Survivor South Africa, Survivor South Africa, Survivor Australia, people in the community now just talk about it weekly, because again, 3 episodes a week is not as bad as 4, but you're still having a lot to keep up with. So people just opt to have a big reaction to the whole week on their channel and do like the power rankings rather than do it every single day, because by the time you get the video out, it's only a couple hours before the next episode will be released. So after a year's absence with no call to entry, Survivor SA fans have been chomping at the bit to enter for a 10th season, and have been wondering why Mnet is remaining silent on whether we'll do another season. So I think they did release a cast, like an application cast form, but obviously they never went through with it. Currently there is no local version of Survivor SA on the Mnet content plan, the channel said in response to a media query. So we're going to go into now, ask why Mnet has not done another season, and what Survivor SA's long-term future outlook on the channel is, and whether the viewers should continue to hold out hope that the local show will return. Mnet says there will be no Survivor SA. Mnet has been broadcasting international seasons of the show, with the latest US season currently available on DSTV catch-up, which is a bit of a cop-out answer. Like, we don't have our own version, which you'll want, but you can watch Survivor US if you want. So it is a bit of a shame that they don't seem super high in returning it, and that they're just kind of giving half responses. So asked about the drop-off in viewers due to the scheduling change to the daily episodes, and asked if Survivor SA ever returns, if Mnet will go back to a format of 1 episode a week. The channel says should the show return, Mnet will look at rescheduling strategy and make a decision that is best for the audience and appetite at the time. So here in the UK, if you're a UK viewer like me that has been interested in the Survivor South Africa community, this is very similar to what happened to Robot Wars. Was there's a show that came back after a couple of years and everyone was excited, and then we're getting season after season. We call them series here in the UK, but to keep consistent, we would get season after season. We got season 8, season 9, season 10, which was my favourite season, and then it just stopped because the scheduling was all over the place and there was a drop in viewers as a result. And there have been even petitions now to get Robot Wars, even now in 2023, to get Robot Wars back in the UK TV limelight, and there's petitions for Survivor South Africa as well to get it back on, because a lot of people really do miss Survivor South Africa. It was kind of this, especially nowadays, Survivor South Africa was always like the little baby in between them. It was like the love child of like the English speaking Survivor seasons, where it felt just right, and you could tell that the people that were producing it were big Survivor fans. They really wanted the product to come off as the best to the viewers, at the detriment of the contestants. Because what this article fails to mention, and I'm not going to mention any names because I don't even want to go down the rabbit hole. For anyone that doesn't know, in Survivor South Africa, there was a pretty serious sexual assault case between one prominent female contestant on the show that made it quite a decent way into the season, and a male figure who made it to the end game and was seen as this individual that everyone should root for. And as a result, through accusations that have been made online, this happened on the show. The producers were very aware of it, but when they were asked if they could do something about it, they said they wouldn't. And not only that, where they you can see the similarities between this and Island of the Idols, where the producers are seen as not doing enough. I mean, Survivor South Africa took it a step further and just didn't really, to my knowledge, didn't do anything. They also then told the individual who was a victim of this situation, as has been described, they told that individual that they shouldn't make a big fuss about it, or they shouldn't be trying to push this issue because it would end up harming the show. And the thing is with Island of the Idols was that, yes, they did show the issues with Dan and they did display it on TV, and that's part of the reason why it caused backlash. But the major reason it caused backlash was because production didn't do that much about the situation. They had a generic, okay, let's just keep ourselves to ourselves talk, didn't really call anyone out. And then by the final 6, when production got involved, between Dan and production, then they actually took action, which was a big knock for the show and caused a lot of individuals to be upset with the show. I don't know if that influenced this thinking in Survivor South Africa from production's perspective, where obviously this was just after Island of the Idols, where they just didn't want it to exist on TV whatsoever. But I feel like there's one thing by not including it so that your show doesn't face backlash, but there's another thing by not doing actually anything to then just not doing anything and hoping that the situation will just solve itself. And I obviously talk about on the second channel a lot about aftercare, good medical care for the contestants, not using them as like these sorts of tokens or pawns where they exist on the show and then you're looking after them, and then as soon as they're off the show, then you just decide, okay, right, whatever, they can sort themselves out. You always have to follow up and make sure that they're okay. That's something that I'm very passionate about, and I've talked about on this channel with my previous upload being Big Brother UK. I've talked about quite prominently in the aftercare department how it is really essential, and I believe that it has even caused legal action from the contestant and their representatives towards this company as well. So they failed to mention that in this article. I'm not sure if the article was aware of or whether that was a conscious decision to leave out those sorts of allegations and discussion points. And I'm using a lot of, like, you'll even see this on, like, the channel as well when I'm discussing even something like Survivor the Game, where I say these words like seemingly and allegations and supposedly, and I use these qualifying statements just because from where I sit right now, I'm not 100% sure on the situation. I have heard about the situation, I've been doing reading into it, but as far as I know, again, someone might correct me in the comments, there hasn't really been an end to this story yet. Like, no one has, like, issued an apology yet. We don't know if what's being said is 100% true, so that's why I say these words like seemingly and supposedly and such, just to cover my own back. But just to let you all know, because I know that quite a few individuals, even that watch Survivor South Africa, they didn't know about it, and it's something that when you do a bit of digging that you finally realise, and it's sort of like the super fans know about this. But talking about super fans on a bit of a lighter note, this season felt very tailor-made for the superfans of Survivor South Africa, which was great. It was great seeing all the strategy. As I said, the boots felt a bit predictable, even the boots that were set up to be blindsides in the episodes. There was a lot of time dedicated to describing an individual being booted, a quote-unquote blindside, which made it not really a blindside, and as a result, it kind of harmed the overall product. Although that being said, again, this was with a larger episode scale than they were used to. I believe, again, they were used to like 40-minute episodes, maybe an hour-long episodes. I know Champions was longer, but as of recent, with season 6, 7, and 8, it was a bit shorter, whereas this season was a lot longer, especially with the non-elimination episodes, so they were sort of maybe felt like they had to explain those moves then, because that's the only content that they could put in. But it felt like if you weren't a super fan of the show, if you weren't aware of the prior Survivor South Africa seasons, it was a bit of a hard season to get into. There were a lot of advantages. It was a bit more slower paced, especially as we're used to in Survivor South Africa, and compared to Survivor US, which is super fast paced, and even Australian Survivor, there was just a lot of chaos happening in Blood versus Water, particularly in the earlier weeks, where obviously you have Brianna, you have Can, you have Sandra Diaz Twine, you have Nina, you have Jordy, Jesse, Sam, so Andy, how could I forget about Andy? So there was all this like chaos happening in Australian Survivor, sort of like this cartoon show, whereas Survivor South Africa was just very neutral, down to earth. So it was a bit of a harder program to get into if you're a casual. Again, I enjoyed the show, but I understand that I've come from a very different position to the majority of individuals who would have been seeing this on their TV, where even if they were interested in Survivor and Survivor South Africa, again, tourney seasons make it tough to draw in new attention. That's why, particularly for Survivor US, they bring in like the really big names, and then they bring in these big themes like winners at war and heroes versus villains, so they kind of account for the individuals that are going to be alienated by trying to check out the program and then realizing that they're all people with histories that they don't know about because they haven't watched prior seasons. But it's tough because obviously they did put a lot of effort into the season, but it was just one of those seasons where through the combination of scheduling, which obviously they took to be able to push the season a bit more, but it kind of resulted in, it's kind of like trying to fit a puzzle piece into a puzzle that just won't accept that piece, a puzzle from an entirely new, different puzzle board. Like, it's just not going to fit, and it kind of felt like that with some of the decisions they were making in Survivor South Africa, and as a result we might not see it on the TV now. I'm not sure if this is just going to be one of those other things where it's a year hiatus and then it comes back. There's been pretty successful petitions that have been happening to try and get it back on air, so I know that Survivor South Africa, you know, they've been checking out individuals on YouTube. They may have even checked out this video. Apologies, because I'm sick and I'm ill. My head is just super frazzled at the moment. It's hard to think clearly, so apologies if this is the first video of mine that you're watching on More Bandit Survivor or just in the Bandit sphere as a whole. But If you are an individual involved in essay production, that's the one thing that I would suggest, is make sure the aftercare is appropriate, because these stories affect you and your company a lot more than you may think. And I think they just made a very bad decision in not even acknowledging the victim that was on this season and talks about the things that supposedly happened. So that's unfortunate. And a bit of a lighter note, my good friend Chris, and if I take two things to actually shout out about him. Firstly, I did this video with him, so make sure to check it out if you haven't already, where we do Survivor Second Chances on the main channel. And then also he has decided to now start a petition where if you're an individual who wants to see Survivor South Africa on the TV screens, he has now launched one. It has over 200 signatures, starting to climb its way up to 250 now, which is pretty insane. I remember the first goal was 100, and now they're making their way to 500, which is insane. They've already got 168 today. And if you're an individual that's watching this video, typically these videos get a couple hundred views, so even if only 50% of you check out this link, that could be 150, 200 people that are actively contributing towards this petition and really trying to make a change in Survivor South Africa returning. And this could be the difference between it returning in a year's time, or maybe 5 years' time, or maybe never returning. So if you do have a spare minute, make sure to fill out this petition. It literally only took me half a minute to do. It's just your first name, last name, email, stuff like that. And Chris, I know, is going to be doing a podcast about the topic tomorrow. It'll be tomorrow morning for me, 10 a.m. in my UK time zone. So for people that are American, that might be very early morning for you, around 5 o'clock. We can always check out the live stream afterwards, so make sure you're contributing towards that. I will be working then, and that's part of the reason why I'm doing all these videos now, is to try and get them all done, because I'm working pretty much for the rest of the week. But make sure to contribute towards the live stream that Chris is doing in whatever way you can, because he's going to be probably pushing this and trying to get Survivor South Africa back on our screens once again, which is what we want. Obviously, we want to see more English-speaking Survivor seasons, and we like seeing different cultures and how they approach this fantastic game. So again, if you are interested, sign this petition. It'll only take half a minute. It's linked in the description. Again, depending on how long it takes to approve this channel with ID and such, the H and the T might have a space. Just close that space, put it into your put into your Google search as the hyperlink, and then be able to contribute towards this to help us all out. But you can also check out the stream that Chris is doing, and I would highly suggest that you check it out. But that's pretty much all I have to say about Survivor South Africa. I know that there's probably going to be individuals that are going to be talking a little bit more in depth about maybe how it affected individuals in Survivor South Africa. If you're South African that is watching this video, let me know how it sort of played out in your country with these time zones. Well, not these time zones, the time slots, and also the episodes per week. How you felt about it from maybe a more casual viewing perspective, or even a super fan perspective, because that'll be super interesting. If you want to hear more of my opinions, I have a Survivor 45 cast breakdown on the channel where we go through the trailer, we talk about the cast, I detail some of my problems that I see coming into the show and potentially for the future of Survivor US, so check that out if you don't want to miss it. But again, thank you so much for checking out this video. If you did enjoy, subscribe, and as always, peace.